History has long told us that power belongs to men. Empires rise under kings, wars are decided by generals, and the fate of nations rests in male hands. But that belief hides a deeper, more unsettling truth. There were moments when the world was not shaped by kings, but by women whose decisions altered the course of civilization. Women who ruled not from the shadows, but from the center of power itself. And in some cases they did so with a precision, intelligence, and ruthlessness that terrified even their enemies. In the vast sweep of history, three names emerge like storms on the horizon. Cleopatra, the queen who turned diplomacy into a weapon sharper than any blade. Wu Zetian, the only woman in thousands of years of Chinese imperial history to claim the throne as emperor, not empress. And Elizabeth I, who stood alone against the greatest naval power of her time and refused to kneel. These were not exceptions to the rule. They were the rule rewritten. Each one challenged the structure of power itself, forcing entire civilizations to adapt around them. But here is the mystery. How did they do it in a world designed to keep them powerless? How did Cleopatra command Rome's most dangerous men without ever leading an army? How did Wu Zetian rise from a concubine to the highest seat of authority in one of the most rigid political systems ever created? And how did Elizabeth turn a fragile island nation into a global force while surrounded by enemies who believed she should never rule at all? These are not just stories of ambition. They are puzzles of strategy, psychology, and timing that historians are still trying to fully understand. As we look closer, the scale of their influence becomes almost impossible to comprehend. Cleopatra did not simply seduce powerful men, she reshaped the balance of power in the ancient Mediterranean, pulling Rome itself into her orbit. Wu Zetian did not merely inherit authority, she rebuilt the entire bureaucratic system to secure her control, rewriting ideology to justify her rule. Elizabeth did not just defend England, she transformed it into a symbol of resilience, guiding it through religious turmoil and political chaos with calculated precision. Each decision they made sent ripples across continents, changing history in ways that are still felt today. Yet the deeper we dig, the more unsettling the truth becomes. Power, in their hands, was not just about ruling. It was about perception, manipulation, and understanding the hidden mechanisms of human behavior. They mastered fear, loyalty, desire, and belief as if they were tools. And perhaps that is why their stories continue to fascinate us today. Because they reveal something we rarely admit. That power is not always held by the strongest, but by those who understand the rules beneath the surface. The question is not who ruled the world. The question is how they rewrote the rules of power itself. And what that means for us today remains unknown. To understand their power, we must move beyond the surface of crowns and titles and look into the invisible systems they controlled. Because none of these women ruled by accident. They engineered their rise within systems specifically designed to exclude them. And the methods they used were not random. They were calculated, adaptive, and deeply psychological. Take Cleopatra. History often reduces her to beauty, but that is the greatest misunderstanding of all. Cleopatra spoke multiple languages, studied philosophy, economics, and political theory, and understood Rome better than many Romans themselves. When she aligned herself with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony, it was not romance. It was geopolitical strategy. Egypt, at the time, was the wealthiest kingdom in the Mediterranean, and Cleopatra positioned herself as indispensable. She controlled grain supply, wealth, and access to the East. In a world where armies fought wars, she controlled what those armies needed to survive. Her true weapon was dependency. Now shift to ancient China. The rise of Wu Zetian is perhaps even more extraordinary. She entered the imperial court as a concubine, one of many, expected to remain invisible. But Wu Zetian understood something critical. Power in the Tang dynasty did not only come from the emperor, but from the bureaucratic machine beneath him. She systematically replaced officials with those loyal to her, expanded the civil service examination system, and promoted merit over aristocratic birth. This was revolutionary. By weakening the old noble families, she broke the traditional power structure that could oppose her. But her most controversial move was ideological. She used Buddhism to legitimize her rule, presenting herself as a divine ruler chosen by cosmic forces. It was not just politics. It was narrative control on a civilizational scale. Then there is Elizabeth I. Unlike Cleopatra or Wu Zetian, Elizabeth inherited a deeply unstable kingdom. Religious divisions threatened to tear England apart, while foreign powers waited for weakness. Yet Elizabeth mastered something even more subtle: ambiguity. She never married, turning her single status into a political tool, allowing her to negotiate alliances without committing to any one power. She controlled her image with precision, presenting herself as both human and almost mythological, the Virgin Queen, a symbol larger than any individual. But behind that image was a network of intelligence, espionage, and calculated decision-making. When the Spanish Armada threatened England, Elizabeth did not just rely on military strength. She used timing, weather, and strategy to turn a defensive situation into a defining victory. But here is the twist. Despite their different cultures and eras, all three women converged on the same underlying mechanism of power. They did not dominate through force alone. They controlled systems, economic systems, bureaucratic systems, psychological systems, and even belief systems. They understood that true power is not about what people see, but about what shapes what people believe to be possible. And the deeper historians investigate, the more unsettling this realization becomes. Because it suggests that power is not fixed. It is fluid. It can be learned, adapted, and redefined. These women did not break the rules. They discovered that the rules themselves were illusions waiting to be rewritten. And once that realization takes hold, it changes everything we thought we knew about history. When we step back and look at the scale of what these women accomplished, something unsettling begins to emerge. Their stories are not just about rare individuals rising against the odds. They expose a deeper truth about power itself. A truth that stretches far beyond ancient Egypt, imperial China, or Elizabethan England. Because if Cleopatra, Wu Zetian, and Elizabeth I could reshape entire civilizations by mastering invisible systems, then power has never truly belonged to those we assume it does. It belongs to those who understand how reality is constructed in the minds of others. Consider this. Empires are often described as machines of war, built on armies, weapons, and conquest. But these women revealed that empires are, at their core, psychological structures. Cleopatra turned perception into leverage, making Rome believe that her survival was essential to its own interests. Wu Zetian rewrote ideology itself, altering what millions of people believed was legitimate authority. Elizabeth transformed fear into unity, convincing a divided nation to see itself as something greater than its internal conflicts. None of these victories were purely physical. They were victories of perception, belief, and narrative. And that leads to a disturbing implication. If power can be shaped through perception, then history itself may not be as solid as we think. What we remember as truth could be the result of narratives crafted by those who understood how to control it. Cleopatra was later portrayed by Roman historians as manipulative and dangerous. Wu Zetian was described as ruthless, even monstrous. Elizabeth was elevated into near myth. But how much of that is reality, and how much is the echo of political storytelling? The deeper we look, the more history begins to feel less like a record, and more like a battlefield of competing narratives. This realization expands the scale of the story beyond individuals. It forces us to question the very foundations of how societies function. Governments, religions, economies, all rely on shared belief systems. And those belief systems can be shaped, redirected, or even weaponized. The three women at the center of this story did not just rule within these systems. They manipulated them at their core. And in doing so, they revealed something both powerful and dangerous, that the structures we trust may be far more fragile than we imagine. But perhaps the most profound implication is not about history. It is about us. Because the mechanisms they used, control of information, influence over perception, strategic use of identity, are not relics of the past. They exist today, amplified by technology, media, and global communication. The same forces that allowed Cleopatra to influence Rome, Wu Zetian to redefine legitimacy, and Elizabeth to unify a nation are still shaping our world in ways we rarely see. So the story does not end with them. It begins with a question. If power is not about strength, but about understanding the hidden systems that shape human belief, then who truly holds power today? And more importantly, are we aware of the forces shaping what we believe to be true? Because history has already shown us one thing with absolute clarity. The most powerful rulers are not always the ones who command armies. They are the ones who quietly redefine reality itself.